And the field of training that you're getting is how to build faulty cars so that they will work for a month and then they'll crack down and go back.
Faulty cars.
Yeah.
No.
You know, how to camouflage and create something that just presents itself properly, but really it doesn't ultimately hold down. It's very challenging to learn that trade, that trick, but you don't really believe in it. So even if you are getting compensated for it, even if you become adept at it, it goes against your grain.
What if you don't know?
Right?
What if you don't know?
So I'm saying, the purpose and the meaning behind what you're doing, this is the first and primary essence of the human being. Then it depends what field he chooses, what he does with it, and so forth. But at least, the first thing is that it should make sense to his intellect, it should make sense to his human values. This is good, this is right. Then you can live with yourself. Are we all here?
Yeah, I think so. You're a rabbi, so.
I'm missing somebody. Where is
Baruch is out, Aaron is out.
Baruch and Aaron? Baruch is with Aaron?
Yeah, he wants to pick him up.
And
Yael wants to pick up.
Yoel is not here?
No. He wants to pick up his brother.
Okay. So everybody that is here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As always, we base our discussion on the Pasha of the week. And we'll stay true to this principle this week as well. But within the Pasha, we will choose something that is also timely, so that we will have a general understanding of the periods. You know that in today's Pasha, Pasha's Emoir, is the primary Pasha of the Moyadas, of the Yom Tovim, of the holidays. All the holidays are described primarily in this Pasha. There are other details added in other Pashas, but primarily this is in this Pasha. Including Sfiras Omer, the counting of the Omer. You will see later on in the Pasha. You say every day, you say every day in the counting, in the Hirotzim. That posik is in today's Pasha. Therefore, it behooves us to talk about this posik, even though it's not exclusively. I'm sorry, Sfiras Omer has already gone several weeks, and it's another. But it's a good moment to stop and focus on it since it's in today's Pasha. In general, Sfiras Omer is the counting of the days between Pesach and Shavuos, between the time that Eden left Mitzrayim, starting from the day after Pesach, after the first day of Pesach, and ending the day before Shavuos, which totals exactly 49 days. That leads us into Shavuos. There are many things that are said regarding this counting of the days. One historical note, it's well down that even when they found out as they left Mitzrayim that they are due to receive the Torah in 49 days, they became very anxious very excited. They started counting the days just to keep tabs. How long more is it before we get to that gracious day? So this is, so to speak, a historical note, and it in fact reminds us of the principle that to receive the Torah, the preparation for receiving the Torah is the longing for it. That itself brings out and reveals in the person the inner workings of the soul and the understanding, even though even at that time we're just out of slavery of the lowest type. Of the lowest type. You would think, how did these people come to desire such a thing as a holy law from God? And yet, as soon as they were told about it, it awakened something in them. From within their slave mentality, they said, this sounds really wonderful. Which clearly attests to the principle that we're constantly talking about. See, this is bringing out, and that we discussed just a moment ago, that the real human being is not the surface. What seems to be occupying him, what seems to be challenging him, that entertains him. The real human being is a neshama, is a soul in the human being. Except that this neshama really is a godly neshama. Just like as God versus world is a created entity. God is not a created entity. God is a primary truth. The neshama is part of God, but the neshama also is a primary truth. And it's totally disinterested in anything less than the real primary truth. Worldliness does not entice the neshama whatsoever. So therefore, when they heard this, at that time they were alive, so to speak. They were open with their whole soul to hear what Moshe had to say. They immediately were able to relate to it. That is really what we wanted. At the time when Moshe Rabbeinu came to Paro, and he told him that he should allow the Jewish people to leave, there's a very important qualifier in his request. Contrary to what many people with not a keen understanding of what happened over there quote, that Moshe came to Paro and said, "Let my people go." There was never such a statement in the whole thing. The statement is, "Let my people go and serve me." Moshe Rabbeinu came to Paro and said, originally you learned it recently, that they want to go out of Egypt for a distance of 3 days, and there we have to serve God. The whole aim is to serve God. And the Jewish people, even though clearly they were glad to shed the yoke of their oppressors and all that, but they also related to this principle, that they're not just going out just for the sake of roaming the desert, or roaming the streets. They're going out in order to acquire a new status and a new identity, an identity that relates them to God. They recognize it from day one. while ago, maybe a long while ago, we discussed here the phenomenon of somebody who is in prison, who's jailed, and he's constantly longing for the moment when he is going to be released from prison. And we were discussing then, assume that the prison is, so to speak, a prison, a humane and a civilized, in a civilized country. He's not being tortured, God forbid. He's not being starved. He's not being discomforted. He's in prison. He's locked. He's not permitted to venture out of a certain area. There are prisons in this country where the prisoners have all kinds of different freedoms, all kinds of different. They can pursue their interests. There are prisoners who finish college while they're in prison. There are prisoners who have all kinds of sports, play tennis. You live a normal life, from a superficial view. And yet, they can't wait the moment when they're going to be released. And I asked the question, what's bothering him so much? Why does he want to be released from prison? Why does he care so much? He is living a normal life. He's got his meals taken care of.
Kind of situation now.
Let me finish the question. He's got his meals taken care of. Huh?
Отпустить.
Yeah, to be free. Right. Doesn't have a worry. He can request any books. Generally speaking, you can forward to the prisoner any books and for him, whatever it is. He can sit the whole day and the night and do his own thing. What is so troublesome and so painful to him to be behind these prison walls? Freedom. And I want to elaborate on this a little bit more before you give your valuable answer. Someone once said, when I presented the question, they said, "Oh, of course, because he can't go wherever he wants to go. He's restricted; he has to be within the walls, and he can't walk wherever he wants to walk." So to this, I answered, "What happens when he is freed? When he goes out of the prison? What is the first thing he does? He picks up and starts running in the streets, making every turn, and is that what he does? Not at all. If he's restricted only because he can't go wherever he wants, so what would be his first
reaction,
so to speak, his first activity to satisfy and to experience that which he was longing for? Should be running around the streets. He doesn't do that. So obviously there's something more that's affecting him than just this freedom of maneuver. Your turn.
I was just saying, it depends on the situation. If you give me a different answer, if someone's married or is in jail and he's waiting to see his kids and all that, the first thing is the reason he might not want to get out because he's every person wants to get out of jail. Every person wants to get out of jail, even on the death row, they want to get out of jail. That's true.
I know. Anyway, clearly there are some differences, but as he's pointing out, now this is almost universal. Almost universal. And a healthy person, a normal person. And the principle behind this is that a human being has a soul. And this soul relates to the infinite reality. It says that one of the big blessings that Hashem bestowed on the human being, that a human being walks on two, erect, in contrast to the animal that walks on four and walks straight, its body straight. And one of the great benefits of that, in addition to many others, is that the animal can walk and never see the sky. His head is naturally it's focused on the ground. A human being almost inevitably will see the sky. He always sees the earth versus the sky, as he is walking normally. What is the sky? The earth, this is the finite entity. The sky is that which is beyond. This is the human being. And if you confine a human being, not allowing him to see this causes what's known as claustrophobia. Claustrophobia, they call it a phobia. Sometimes a person is not well, so he can't tolerate being close to it. You know what claustrophobic means? Huh?
Phobia.
Phobia means a sickness, a disorder. So we say it's a cluster disorder. Huh? Yeah, but it's a phobia. It's unjustified, right? A normal person is not yet so scared of it. But that's only for temporarily. But if it is done for a longer period of time, then everybody suffers. It's intolerable. It's intolerable. This is what they do in the harsh prisons and in the isolated cells. It's intolerable. There were cells like that I was reading. In Russia, they have cells that had a little hole in the wall, way up where, just to allow some air to come in. So the prisoners would do everything just to look through this hole and to see outside. Even though he doesn't do it, just to take a peek. So the longing for freedom is not the ability to run around and move around wherever he wants. It is the freedom to relate to the reality that his soul relates to. That's what a human being is. When Eden were told they're going out of Mitzrayim, what was their longing about it? What was the greatness of it? That now they can really open up their soul. It's not just the freedom to roam around and do what they want. And thus, when they were told that the aim and the purpose and the end station of their coming out of Mitzrayim is to receive the Torah, this really gave it to them in total. And they started counting the days. In this counting of the days, it's also additionally explained that why did Hashem actually make such an extension of time if he didn't have such a great desire for it? They're ready for the Torah. Give it to them right away. Why wait 50 days? And the explanation is that even though they had this longing inside the neshama, but, as we mentioned before in this discussion, that the neshama in a human being, thank you, I heard you. It's going to repeat itself several times. So it is true that they were aroused and they recognized right away what the true desire is. Nevertheless, it's important to understand, as we always point out, that the neshama functions through the offices of the body. A person cannot conceptualize and relate to something that is exclusively spiritual. It has to be able to be translated and to be related to something physical, to something tangible in the world. Because the neshama functions through the goof. Therefore, the body also has to be acclimated, has to be trained to understand this is what I'm looking for, and be explained why do I look for it and how it is going to affect you and so forth. Therefore, the moment when they were freed, miraculously, that Hashem simply plucked them out, tore them out of Mitzrayim, of this subjugation, of this lowliness, and elevated them, it is true that He elevated them and aroused their neshama. But this did not really permeate and change their whole person in terms of how they functioned in concert, in combination with the body, with the human being. In order to accomplish Matan Torah in full, that they should actually accept it and it should be a lasting connection, they had to simply prepare their physical experience, their worldly orientation towards the receiving of the Torah. And this is the explanation for the 49 days. As you know, that 49 days is 7 times 7, which represents a full conjugation of every one of the 7 midas that a person has. Do you understand what I'm saying? And there are 7 midas: Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Yisod, Malchus. And each one of these midas has various details and nuances and variations. And 7 times 7, generally speaking, this is all in a very general sense. Each midah has 7 different variations in combination with all the other midas. So 7 times 7, this represents the entire spectrum of human emotion, of human interest. And thus, this allowed them to focus on each one of these midas at some degree of detail, some degree of focus, and this was able to prepare them for Matan Torah.
I was just wondering how, when we read that, we read a little thing every day. How does that prepare us for Shavuos? Reading 1 or 2 lines, and also what did they read what did they do in the midbar that was preparing them specifically?
Okay. So this is more or less what I want to focus on this discussion here. Well, there are 2 points I want to discuss. First, as we started already, the necessity of dealing with one's midas, attributes, attitudes, how one reacts to various things. Attitudes, how one reacts, how one looks at things. But, oh, look at him, oh, look at that. Well, why does he seem like this? Why does he like this? It's an attitude. One may ask, they're going to receive the Torah. The Torah is a godly law, directive, tells them do's and don'ts. And beyond do's and don'ts, it also tells them all the truth about the world, the truth about God. This is basically something which pertains to which a person accepts and relates and receives through his intellect. So what does the midas have to do with the intellect? Why can't I learn and know what the Torah says? Why do I need to prepare my emotion? Essentially, midas is the emotion. Why do I need to prepare the emotion and to pay attention to that in order to be able to learn Torah? This is an intellectual thing. As a matter of fact, we always pride ourselves in saying that the intellect is something that is objective. You know what the word objective means? Unrelated to my personal preference. This is the pure truth, the way it is. And this is true, that a human being is the only creature in the world. And this is the marvelous blessing that Hashem gave a human being. It's a supreme creature, that he can really learn something at its purest truth. Nothing to do with himself, not on the basis of, do I like it or do I don't like it? Like we pointed out many times, a human being observes the same thing like an animal observes. They see totally different things. A human being sees, its beauty, its greatness, whatever it is, and the animal says, is it edible or not edible? That's basically its question. Completely, there's no objective experience on the animal level, no matter how smart the animal is. So if learning Torah is this absolute truth that we can learn with our intellect in an objective status, an objective level, why do we need to prepare ourselves on an emotional level in order to receive the Torah? And the response, the answer to this is that I'll answer it in two stages. The first one may be more obvious one, that if you learn something that you are not ready to accept emotionally, even if you understand it, it's not going to, you're not going to absorb it, you're not going to be allowed, it's not going to be part of you. It's not going to have its effect. It's obvious. You learn something, it says it's wonderful, but it's not for me. It's not for me. I'm not up to it. So it doesn't have its effect. There is a deeper element in this, which perhaps is not so obvious, but it is absolutely correct, true, that in truth, you don't even fully understand what you're learning unless you have purified your emotions. Purified and collected your emotions.
Meaning what?
Torah, every word in Torah, every concept in Torah is a godly thought, it's a godly concept. Godliness is pure. It's impossible to understand a godly thought, no matter how simple, with an impure heart, with a subverted heart, with a perverted heart. It's impossible. You can know what it says, and you can repeat it. And everybody around you may think, oh, he really knows it, I understand, but you don't really understand it. Understanding means that you can really relate to it personally. Not that you can repeat what you learn, what you saw. This is really true. In order to recognize that this is really true, you have to have a pure heart to be able to relate to it. I will give you an example, a very, very simple example, But it's not so simple to recognize the depth of this example. I'd like you to focus in with me. 2 times 2 equals to 4. Everybody knows that, right? 2 times 2 equals to 4. We touched on this principle several times over the test period. Everybody knows it. Now, 2 times 2 equals to 4 is a, so to speak, a physical fact. You can take 2, put another 2 next to it, count them over, and you have 4. So this is not 2 times 2 equals 4. That's a concept of 2 times 2. It's just a sum total. You can prove it. I mentioned to you, I think, that there was this gentleman years back who trained his doggy. I saw it. He trained his doggy. His doggy was his companion. This is the person. This is the here, a dog, a kelp. And are you companion, his friend. He walked around with his dog. Nebuch, he was a lonely man. Apparently he was pretty intelligent, but somehow he lived alone, a lonely man. And this dog walked around, and he demonstrated that he had actually taught this dog simple arithmetic. So he would say 2 and 3, and the dog would bark out 5 times. Okay, oh, wonderful, look at this, intelligence. Now, any one of you think that the dog had the same concept of 2 plus 3, that equals to 5, as any one of you? You think the dog understood it the same way as any human being?
No, sure it didn't.
I'm sorry?
Sure it didn't.
For sure it did. What is the difference? I know it's a challenging question, but I'd like you to think with me. What in fact is the difference?
I think
I said we should think. You thought it through already?
I thought it through, but no.
Okay, go ahead.
I think that when a dog is being trained, it's being taught to understand that when this person says these 2 sounds, he should bark 5 times. I don't think he fully understands. Those dogs fully understand. That's my understanding. My understanding is the dog is not actually comprehending 2 plus 3 equals 5.
And what does a human being understand?
Human being understands that the logic behind 2 plus 3 equals the number 5.
And what is the logic behind it? The proof of it? No, it's like you put 2 and 3 and then you count to 5. How does a human being, what compels a human being to say that 2 plus 3 equals to 5? Because he can prove it?
He can,
The logic?
He can prove it, he can understand it.
What does he understand?
How to prove it?
No. Okay, so that's why I said, let's think, okay? What?
An animal is limited in the way it thinks and how much it can comprehend, but it does have the ability to think and make actions for itself. But ultimately, man and animal have a difference, and man has a choice between good and evil, while an animal just does what it knows. It doesn't have the idea of what is right and wrong. It's an instinct that we and animals both have, but we have the instinct also to stop. An animal will have the instinct to eat, but it won't have that instinct to hold back.
All right, my dear friend, okay, I hear that. All right, fine, this is a different area altogether, but I just want to point out to you, instinct is not human. Human is intelligence, not instinct. This is a perversion of human beings. And I know that this is how they speak about it. This is when they want to define the human being as an intelligent animal, but we're not animals. We are human beings. It's a different category of being, completely. But this is just because you made that comment, so I just want to discuss a little deeper aspect. And if you would not stretch out, you won't fall asleep. So, Please understand, I'd like you to follow this. What is 2? We take it for granted.
2 is more than 1.
A number.
Well, you can't have 2 without 1.
Coffee.
I hate to say it. An intelligent person doesn't answer before he understands the question. What is 2? What does it 2 mean to human beings?
Sure.
How does it relate to 2? What did just finish saying? Please, gentlemen. What is when you say 2, show 2, it means something to human beings, something beyond the number 2. Because otherwise, why isn't 2 1 and 1? And 4, 1 and 1 and 1 and 1? How does it become 2? What correlates these 2 elements? Is this correlation, say, just a convention? We decided since there were 2, we call it 2. Or is 2 a reality? Is there something real in our concept of the number 2?
Well, the way we grasp it, or what do you mean by
convention? Means we decided, we because we can count, we say, okay, 1 and 2, so we decided to call it 2. Actually, it is not 2, this is 1 and 1. Mm. What correlates it is just our way of dealing with it. Instead of saying, you owe me $1 and $1, I say you owe me $2. For brevity and for ease of dealing with it, of management. Or is there such a thing as 2, in essence? And if there is such a thing as 2 in essence, what is it? Where does it come from? What's the basis of it? What's the relationship? And here's a cup here. What's the relationship between these 2 cups? That we should call it 2 cups. This cup is a cup independently of this one.
Why is it even called a cup?
What?
No, that's not the.
Why is it even called a cup?
No. Yeah, don't confuse the issue. What is the element of 2? Have to do with how did it become 2? And yet, we don't have a difficulty. None of us have a difficulty to relate to this concept. As a matter of fact, a young child, it takes time for a child to be able to relate to this concept. But after a while, after we explain to him and we show him, and he begins to relate to it automatically. What in fact is this? What is it that allows us to relate, to correlate things like this? Gentlemen, what allows us to correlate things like this is because is our concept, our realization, and our insight, our perception that there is unity in the world. Hashem Echad. There is overall unity in the world. And this is what allows us, this is what correlates things in our mind. It's a reality. That concept doesn't exist in the mind of an animal. He may be trained to know one-on-one, and one-on-one and one-on-one and one. But the concept of two per se doesn't exist. We have a deen of a minyan. What's a minyan?
10 people.
10 people. 10 people in Torah and Halacha constitute what's called an Eido, constitute a tzibur, change the entire situation. The difference between having 9 people and 10 people is phenomenal in Torah. It's dramatic. What's 10? 10 individuals? No. 10 is an entity of 10. So that, obviously there's much to speak about this, but just to introduce and to get to the point which we started discussing. In order for a person to understand a Torah concept, any Torah concept, he has to have a sense of purity. If one individual does not recognize any kind of interrelation with another individual, if his perception of himself is totally in isolation from everybody else, there's no correlation. The fact that you are here is actually disturbing me. You're taking up my space. I could have been over there too. If he does not understand the concept of unity, interrelation, if he does not, and I cannot relate to a higher concept of that which unifies people, of midas, how do you relate to people? What are midas? Midas, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, and said, these are all elements of human behavior on the simplest level, the deeper things. Is this a kindergarten or something? Okay, thank God.
Thank God.
Then we would not be able to understand Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'ha'aretz. You won't be able to understand the first thing in the Torah. This is why we have, it says that we have to labor in Torah. Why labor? It's logical. Why can't I understand what it says? The answer is that I myself am preventing myself from understanding it. Because I cannot relate to this refined concept. And I have to labor and dig into my own deeper thoughts and find it and see, oh yeah, I see, that's wow, what a thought. And then the minute I get it, I lose it again. Because, oh yeah, I look at the world. I can just play in kindergarten while we're talking about the deepest thing ever. It doesn't bother me. I don't sense anything greater, anything human, deeper. It's a play. to prepare for Matan Torah, it was necessary, and this was the first phase of it, that just because we came out of Mitzrayim, just because we recognized, I want to have the Torah, doesn't make you ready to receive it. Doesn't make you ready to receive it at all. You have to start recognizing your own obstacles to understanding the Torah. Your own short-sightedness, your own imprisonment, so to speak, in the world. That you cannot see things outside, beyond the physical denomination.
Beyond oneself.
This is the Sfiras Omer. And the Sfiras Omer tells us, how do you deal with this? How do you prepare yourself? How do you refine yourself? So at the minimum it tells you that if a person wants to refine himself and prepare himself for Matan Torah, receiving the Torah, he has to delve. What delve means? Dig in, go deeper. Delve into each one meter. Deeper than the surface. Oh, I dealt with Chesed, I dealt with Gvura. Go down and examine yourself and see there's Chesed Sheba Chesed, there's Gvura Sheba Chesed, there's Tiferes Sheba Chesed. I want you to understand that these denominations, these variations, 7 times 7, are also very general. The truth is that it splits up into unlimited little parts. And in order to purify it, truly, in order for a person to truly raise himself out of any midah, any quality that needs purification, he has to really break it down to the minutest detail. And then he can truly wash it out and clean it out. And the illustration for this concept of breaking it down into the finest detail and facing it and recognizing at the finest level, and then he can actually absorb it and elevate himself. There's a very simple way to illustrate this. Again, I remember years back I spoke about this. Maybe some of you were there present. The food that we eat. What happens to the food that we eat?
Elevate.
We chew it up. We digest it.
Right.
And after it digests, it goes into our bloodstream. The food goes into our bloodstream and becomes part of us. Why do we need to put the food into our mouth, chew it, digest it, and create all kinds of whole system? Take a little food, insert it into our bloodstream, and we got it. What will happen if you do that? You poison the bloodstream. How long can a person live like that? You poison his bloodstream in instant. How, in fact, does it happen that this food that we eat goes into our bloodstream? There's a whole digestive system. The first state of the digestion is in our mouth itself. The saliva begins to break down the food. And immediately it begins to separate. Acceptable, not acceptable. Rejecting or accepting. Immediately. And then as it goes further through the digestive system, it further breaks down, and what's that which is accepted, it first breaks down, and again separates good from bad, accepted and rejected, until finally, this goes through a very long process. Until finally, what happens is, now listen, this is interesting. Throughout the entire process, the food is kept in a conduit, in a pipe. It's not allowed to venture out of the pipe. If it's ventured out of the pipe, it will be poisonous. If there's a hole of Islam in the tubes, digestive tube, the person can become poisoned. Give him a little jumping. Come. I missed you. Come sit down. So, it's not allowed to be mixed. It has to stay in a pipeline. The pipeline has to be healthy and keep the food inside. What happens after the digestive system is finished and it actually identified that part of the food that is so refined and so pure that this is allowed to go into the bloodstream. What happens to that? It actually flows right through the membrane, where the membrane is, to the skin of the pipeline. It goes right through the membrane into the bloodstream. Nothing stops it because it's so refined that it's no longer being held back by the membrane. It seeps right through, and then it goes in the bloodstream, and that way it can live. In other words, what can seep through into the human being in a real sense? That which is so refined that the membrane doesn't hold it back. The membrane is a very fine membrane that holds back all kinds of impurities. But there's a certain level of the food that becomes so pure that it really belongs in it, allows it through. And if not for this, if it didn't get digested properly and it doesn't get purified, then the food comes and goes and does nothing for the person. Does nothing. In other words, what really settles into the person, that which is so refined that it's no longer discernible, distinguishable. You can no longer distinguish. You know what distinguish means? Separate from that which is the person and that which came from outside. Then it goes right into the bloodstream. The same is true when one wants to purify himself in his midas, in his attributes. He wants to elevate himself. He wants to prepare himself to be able to understand the royal Torah. It is not enough to identify something and say, okay, this is not good. It's not good and it was going to stay this way. It has to be broken down. One has to focus in and refine his identification of this which is not good to such an extent that now it becomes part of his own bloodstream, part of his own thought process. Then this really unites with him, and now he's really taking care of this particular element. It's not enough for us to say it's not appropriate to hurt another person. That's not going to do anything. It's not going to do anything. One has to think into this element and understand the ramifications of that. Why is it not good? Where does it come from? How come I have such a tendency? How can I ever think of doing that? One has to truly understand himself and see how he himself really rejects it. Only this way, each one on his own level and so forth, only this way do we have any effect from all that labor. Whether it means, like I say, the simple example, I hurt somebody, or to trivialize. What trivialize means? Make small things, make unimportant things which are important. Make a joke out of things which don't belong to be joked about. There are things that you can occasionally make a joke. There's no harm. But sometimes you have to be serious. You have to be attentive. You have to say, this is important. This is serious stuff. You can't trivialize everything. Trivial means something unimportant. God forbid, if a person gets in the habit of this trivializing, of making light of things, this can prevent him from growing into manhood. This can prevent him to become a human being. He can learn and learn and then nothing happens. Nothing is significant. This is what Sfiras Omer represents. And I said Sfiras Omer is at the high level, so to speak, in the Torah, but when you break it down and bring it down, so to speak, into Chassidus, into Avodas Hashem, into real Avodah, it is much more than 49. And we don't do everything in a period of 1 month. It is important as we grow to examine every element that we identify, one at a time, and to truly examine it. And break it down into its elements, and fully understand its pros and its cons, its good and its bad. Only this way is all our labor have results. The same is true about, physical growth. Spiritual growth is no different. Just as food cannot be accepted by the body unless it's refined at the level that the body can accept it, surely spiritual growth does not occur unless you refine it that the neshama can accept it. Otherwise, it's all in vain. God forbid. So, to conclude, as we always do, the Rebbe should help that each one of us should wake up, understand this is serious stuff. This is not a joke here. Hopefully, you're in yeshiva, whatever period in yeshiva, hopefully you leave, when the time you're able to leave, a different person than you came in. A responsible person, with insights, with a sense of values. Each one, this is not the end, we can go to another issue, whatever it is, but something real has to happen. Whatever you take has to be real. You should all be successful with that. Maybe should bless you all. You should receive the Torah full-heartedly, with a full mind, and it should really have a proper effect on all of us.
Oh, man. Great.
Shall we?